You're a liability now, Kira. The words cracked through the conference room. 7 executives in perfectly tailored suits stared at me from the other side of the polished table as I looked down at the termination documents. My left hand, the ruined one, shook inside its compression glove. 2 minutes earlier, I'd been summoned for what they called a recovery check-in. Instead, this was what I got. After careful consideration of your condition, we've concluded that continued employment poses unacceptable operational risk. The man speaking, Harlan, the operations director, never met my eyes. The overhead lights gleamed off his bald scalp as he slid the folder toward me. My mouth went dry. The surgical scars beneath my glove pulsed in time with my pounding heart. "But I'm healing," I whispered, hating how weak my voice sounded. The doctor said 8 more weeks of therapy, and I could return to modified duties. A woman I'd never seen before, sharp blazer, even sharper eyes, leaned forward. "Our legal team has reviewed your case thoroughly. Your workers' compensation benefits will continue for the required period, but your role has been eliminated." The room tilted. 18 months of surgeries, 7 operations, endless nights crying through pain so violent it made me sick, endured because I believed I had something to come back to. I'm Kira Voss, 28 years old, and until this moment, I was a line supervisor at one of the largest manufacturing plants in the Northwest. Before I continue, please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know my story reached real people, because for a long time I felt completely alone. And if you think this is bad, wait until you hear what happened next. Please like and subscribe, because I'm sharing this, so others know they're not powerless. The accident happened on a midnight shift. We were rushing a special order, something management had promised a client even though the facility was already stretched past capacity. The conveyor system jammed. I reached in to clear it, something I'd done 100 times before, but this time, someone in the control room bypassed the safety lockout. The belt jerked forward, trapping my hand between metal rollers. I remember screaming, and then almost nothing, until I woke up in the emergency room with doctors telling me they'd try to save whatever they could of my hand. "Can you sign here acknowledging receipt of your separation agreement?" Harlan extended a pen toward my right hand, my good hand, while everyone watched. "You want me to sign right now?" I glanced at the thick stack of papers. "Don't I get time to review these with someone?" "Of course," said the sharp-eyed woman, Bryn from legal, as she finally introduced herself. "You have 7 days to review and sign, but you'll need to collect your personal belongings today. Security will escort you to your desk." Security. Like I was a threat now. The guard, Tanner, had known me for 6 years. He kept his eyes on the floor as he walked me to my small office in the administrative wing. People peeked over cubicle walls as we passed. I held my chin up even as my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. "I'm sorry, Kira," Tanner muttered when we reached my door. "This isn't right." "Do you have to watch me pack?" I asked. He paused. "I'm supposed to, but I need coffee. Might take me 15 minutes to get it." He walked away, giving me privacy I technically wasn't allowed. I collapsed into my chair and stared at the beige walls. For nearly 7 years, I'd given everything to this company. I started on the production floor straight out of college with my industrial engineering degree, working night shifts while my friends enjoyed their 20s. I earned every promotion. Before the accident, I was on track to become the youngest production manager in the company's history. Now I was trash to be taken out. I grabbed a cardboard box from the supply closet and started clearing my desk. Family photos. A small plant my mother gave me when I got promoted. The ceramic mug my team bought me last Christmas, before the accident, when I was still whole. Before I became the woman they avoided awkwardly in the hallway. The bottom drawer stuck, just as it always had. I yanked it harder than necessary with my good hand, and it slammed to the floor, spilling its contents everywhere. "Perfect," I muttered, kneeling to gather everything despite the sharp pain shooting through my healing wrist. That's when I noticed the folder that had slid beneath my desk. Old Manila, it read in faded handwriting I recognized immediately. My grandfather's. Granddad had worked for this very company decades ago as some kind of engineering consultant before the current owners took over. When he passed 3 years ago, I'd brought some of his old work journals to my office, thinking they might hold useful institutional knowledge. I'd skimmed them once, then forgotten them in my bottom drawer. I opened the folder. Inside were his meticulous notes about the original facility construction, along with something I'd missed before: a small envelope taped to the back cover. Inside was a carbon copy of a legal document dated 1982. The heading read, Mineral Rights Retention Agreement. My phone buzzed. A text from Tanner. They're asking where I am. Wrapping up soon, I replied. I quickly photographed the document, then slipped it into my bag instead of the box. Something in my chest told me this wasn't something to hand over. After Tanner escorted me to my car, I sat in the parking lot, staring at the sprawling facility where I'd spent my entire adult life. The main production building had been built in the 1980s on land that, according to my grandfather's document, contained something valuable beneath it. I drove to the small apartment I could barely afford on workers' comp payments. The surgeons had done their best, but my left hand would never be the same. I couldn't make a complete fist, couldn't feel 3 of my fingertips, and couldn't open jars or button shirts without pain rippling up my arm. That night, I spread my grandfather's papers across my kitchen table and read every word. The more I read, the faster my heart raced. Granddad had been brilliant, smarter than I realized. When the company wanted to expand onto a new parcel of land in 1982, he'd negotiated his severance to include retention of the mineral rights beneath the proposed facility. At the time, those rights seemed worthless, just the quirk of an engineer who liked owning things outright. But Granddad had suspected something. His notes referenced soil samples and geological surveys suggesting rare earth minerals might be present, elements not particularly valuable then, but ones he believed would be crucial in the future. He was right. Those minerals were now essential in everything from smartphones to electric vehicles, and demand had skyrocketed over the past decade. According to this legally binding document, my grandfather, and now I, as his sole heir, owned everything beneath the main production facility. The next morning, I called an attorney, not one who handled workplace injuries, but someone specializing in mineral rights. Using part of my modest savings, I secured a consultation with Ree, who examined my grandfather's document with growing interest. "If this is authentic," she said, tapping the paper, "and if these minerals exist in the quantities your grandfather suspected, this could be extraordinarily valuable." "How valuable?" I asked. "We'd need surveys to confirm, but based on current market prices for these elements, potentially millions." I nearly fell out of my chair. Millions? "The question," she continued, "is whether the company knows about this agreement. Have they been extracting anything beneath the facility?" "No," I said, "but they're planning to. There's a major expansion project starting next month. They're demolishing the old main building to construct something bigger." Ree's eyes widened. "Then they'll have to drill deep foundations. And if they hit those minerals, they'd have to pay me," I finished. "Yes, and based on this document, they'd need your permission even to disturb the deposits." For the first time since my accident, I felt something other than pain and despair. It wasn't quite hope. It was colder than that, harder, sharper. "What do we do next?" I asked. "We verify the document's authenticity, confirm your inheritance rights, and run discrete testing to find out what's really down there," she said, all without alerting the company. Over the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. To anyone watching, I was just another injured worker stumbling through physical therapy and job applications, but every spare moment went into building my case. Reconnected me with a geologist who used public records and historical surveys to confirm my grandfather's suspicions without ever stepping onto company property. The results exceeded even his expectations. The rare earth elements were there, concentrated in a deposit directly beneath the main facility. Current market value? I asked during a meeting with Ree and the geologist. Approximately $13 million, he replied. Possibly more, depending on extraction costs. 13 million. The number burned in my mind like a neon sign. Meanwhile, the company pushed ahead with its expansion plans. Local news covered their announcement of a cutting-edge production facility that would supposedly revitalize the region's manufacturing sector. The CEO, Damien, smiled for the cameras, talking about progress in the future. My future, according to them, had been tossed aside like the defective parts we used to scrap on the production line. I tracked their progress through former coworkers who still spoke to me. The schedule accelerated. Demolition would begin in just 10 days. They'd already started clearing equipment. We need to act now, Ree warned. Once they break ground, everything gets complicated. I want a meeting, I said, with Damien and the board, and I want it in that building. They'll refuse. Tell them I'm considering legal action over my termination and the accident. Tell them I want to settle quietly. She nodded. They'll agree just to make you go away. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon. I spent hours preparing, rehearsing every word, every pause. I chose my outfit carefully. Professional, understated. I didn't want to give anything away. Ree would come with me, but we agreed she'd stay silent unless legal questions came up. This confrontation had to be mine. The night before, sleep wouldn't come. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, slipping off my compression glove and staring at my damaged hand, the twisted fingers, the glossy red surgical scars, the constant reminder of how disposable I'd been to them. Tomorrow, I whispered to my reflection, everything changes. I arrived at the facility 15 minutes early. Tanner met me at the security desk, surprise clear on his face. They didn't tell me it was you coming in, he said as he processed my visitor badge. Would you have worn your good uniform if you'd known? I tried to joke. He didn't smile. They'd been clearing out the executive floor all week for demolition. The conference room was about the only place still intact. Walking through the facility felt surreal. Empty spaces where machinery had once roared, walls marked for destruction, the ghosts of my former life echoing in every corner. Bryn met us at the elevator. Miss Voss, she said with practiced neutrality, the others are waiting upstairs. In the conference room sat Damien, Harlan, and two board members I recognized from company photos. Their expressions ranged from annoyance to suspicion. Kira, Damien began without standing, I understand you wanted to discuss your separation package. While we sympathize with your situation, our decision is final. I placed my bag on the table but stayed standing. Actually, I'm here about your expansion project. Confusion flickered across his face. Our what? The demolition scheduled for next week, the new facility you're planning to build. Harlan leaned forward. What could that possibly have to do with you? I glanced at Ree, who gave me a subtle nod. Before we continue, I said, I'd like to know if you're recording this meeting. We are not, Bryn replied, clearly irritated. Good. Then I'll record it for my protection. I set my phone on the table and started the recording app. Now wait, Harlan began. It's perfectly legal to record a conversation I'm part of, I interrupted, unless you have something to hide. The room tensed. I could feel their collective annoyance hardening into something sharper. You have 5 minutes, Damien said. I reached into my bag and removed the folder. My hands, both the good and the damaged, were steady. Do any of you know who Edmund Voss was? Blank stares met my question. He was my grandfather. He worked as an engineering consultant for this company from 1977 to 1982. He helped design the foundation for this very building. Ms. Voss, Bryn interjected, is there a point to this history lesson? When my grandfather left the company, I continued, He negotiated an unusual severance package. I opened the folder and slid the now authenticated document across the table. He retained all mineral rights to the land beneath this facility. Damien didn't even glance at the paper. That's impossible. The company owns this property outright. You own the surface rights, I said, but everything beneath, specifically from 20 feet down, belongs to the estate of Edmund Voss, which as his sole heir means me. Now he looked at the document, picking it up with manicured fingers. His expression remained smooth, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. This is some kind of joke, Harlan said, reaching for the paper. Or a forgery. It's been authenticated, Reese spoke for the first time. We have the original in safekeeping, filed with the county recorder last week. It's legitimate. Even if this were real, Bryn said, studying the document Harlan handed her, mineral rights are only valuable if there's something worth extracting. That's when I placed the geological survey on the table. Neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, all rare earth elements critical to modern technology, all present in significant quantities, approximately 40 feet beneath where we were sitting. Current market value? Approximately $13 million. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. I could almost see the calculations running behind their eyes. Your expansion project, I continued, will require deep excavation for the new foundation. According to this agreement, you cannot disturb these minerals without my express permission, which would involve a new contract and appropriate compensation. Damien's face had lost its practiced smoothness. This is extortion. No, I replied calmly. This is business, the same business sense that told you an injured worker was too costly to keep around. We'll challenge this in court, Bryn said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. You can try, I said, but construction delays while litigation drags on would cost you millions in lost production, not to mention the publicity when people learn you fired the injured granddaughter of the man whose minerals you're trying to take. Silence stretched across the room as I stood there, looking down at the people who had discarded me without hesitation. What do you want? Damien finally asked, his voice tight. I smiled for the first time since walking in. Now we can negotiate. What did I want? I repeated his question, letting it hang. For 18 months, I'd wanted only one thing, to heal enough to return to my job. Now I stood holding something they desperately needed, and the shift in power tightened my chest with an emotion I couldn't quite name. First, I said, I want an acknowledgement that the safety protocols that failed the night of my accident were inadequate. Absolutely not, Bryn snapped. That's an admission of liability. We can't. Damien raised a hand to silence her. Continue. Second, I want compensation beyond workers' comp, enough to cover my ongoing therapy and the career opportunities I've lost. I watched their faces carefully. Damien's expression stayed controlled, but I could see the calculations running. 13 million versus whatever it would cost to make me disappear. And third, I want a public apology for how I was treated after my injury. Not a carefully worded press release, but a real acknowledgement of how this company discards injured workers. Harlan scoffed. This is ridiculous. We don't even know if this mineral claim is legitimate. You're welcome to contest it, I replied, but your construction permits are already filed. Your investors expect ground to break next week. How will they react when you announce the project is delayed indefinitely, while you fight a legal battle against a former employee with valid mineral rights? Silence again. I stayed standing, my damaged hand resting beside the documents that had turned me from victim into adversary. We'll need time to consider our options, Damien said. You have until Monday, I answered. After that, I file an injunction against your construction project. As Rhea and I headed for the elevator, Bryn hurried after us. Kira, wait. Her voice had softened. Maybe we can discuss this more constructively. Monday, I repeated without turning back. In the car, Rhea let out a long breath. You were incredible in there. I was terrified, I admitted. She squeezed my shoulder. They couldn't tell. But be prepared. They won't give up easily. Companies like this have resources. She was right. That evening, a black SUV followed me home from the grocery store, staying 3 cars back until I pulled into my apartment complex. I caught only a glimpse of the driver, a man wearing sunglasses despite the setting sun. The next morning, my mother called in a panic. Someone from your company asked strange questions about your grandfather's estate. How did they get my number? The intimidation escalated over the weekend. My email flooded with messages from unknown senders. My phone rang non-stop with blocked numbers. Sunday night, I found a note on my windshield. Take the first offer. By Monday morning, I was running on caffeine and nerves. Ree arrived early with a digital security expert named Wade, who swept my apartment for surveillance and locked down my phone and laptop. They're desperate, Wade said. That's good. It means they know you've cornered them. At 10 a.m., Damien's assistant called to schedule a meeting for that afternoon, not at the facility this time, but at their corporate headquarters downtown. Neutral ground, Ree noted. They're trying to regain control. Will it just be Damien? I asked. No, she said. Their lead counsel will be there. Someone named Thorne. I froze. Everyone knew Thorne. He wasn't just their lawyer. He was the fixer, the one who made problems vanish. Cold, methodical, ruthless. If they were bringing him in, they weren't planning to negotiate. They were planning to destroy me. We need backup, I told Ree. Can you get someone else from your firm? 4 hours later, we sat in a gleaming conference room overlooking the city skyline, the contrast to my old workplace impossibly stark. Everything in that room screamed money and power. The company logo dominated one wall, its blue and silver colors reflected in the glass table where we waited. The door opened and they filed in, Damien, Bryn, 2 board members, and finally Thorne, tall and silver-haired, with eyes that cataloged weaknesses the way other people read books. He didn't offer a handshake. Ms. Voss, he began without preamble, I've reviewed your claim regarding the mineral rights beneath our production facility. His voice was surprisingly soft, almost gentle, which somehow made him more intimidating. While the document appears authentic, there are several problems with your position. He opened a leather portfolio. First, the land parcel described in this agreement was substantially modified during rezoning in 1997. Second, mineral rights in our state revert to the surface owner if not actively exercised within 20 years. I glanced at Ree, whose expression stayed neutral even as my stomach sank. And third, Thorne continued, sliding a document across the table, your grandfather's estate was probated without this asset being declared. That raises serious questions about your standing to assert these rights. For a moment, the confidence I'd built cracked. They'd done their homework, uncovering legal angles I hadn't considered. Despite these issues, Damien said, leaning forward, we're prepared to be generous. We'll offer you a consulting contract, $150,000 annually for 2 years, to assist with the transition to the new facility. In exchange, you'll sign a comprehensive release of all claims, including these purported mineral rights. It was insulting, $300,000 for $13 million in minerals. Before I could respond, the door opened again. A tall woman with cropped gray hair entered carrying a slim briefcase. Sorry I'm late, she said, taking a seat beside Ree. Traffic was dreadful. And you are? Thorne asked, irritation flashing across his face. Lena Mason, mineral rights specialist. She glanced at me. Miss Voss asked me to join once she learned you'd be attending, Mr. Thorne. The energy in the room shifted. I hadn't known who Ree was bringing, but Thorne clearly recognized the name. His posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Now, Lena continued, opening her briefcase, your arguments about rezoning and dormant mineral rights would be excellent if they applied here. They don't. She produced a map. The 1997 rezoning modified property lines but explicitly preserved all existing mineral rights agreements, page 42 of the county resolution. She handed copies around. And our state's dormancy statute exempts rare earth minerals, which weren't commercially viable until recently. The legislature anticipated future value and protected long-term rights holders. Thorne's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened around his pen. As for probate, Lena said, that's simply incorrect. The mineral rights were listed in Schedule B of Edmund Voss's estate inventory. You were likely reviewing the preliminary filing, not the final amended documents. She slid another paper across the table. Recorded 8 years ago. I watched the company representatives exchange looks. They hadn't expected this level of preparation. Even if Ms. Voss's claim is valid, Bryn interjected, we can still proceed with construction if we don't extract the minerals. Technically, yes, Lena replied, but your plans include underground parking and storage, which would disturb the deposits and legally constitute extraction. We could modify the plans, Damien suggested. You could, I said, finding my voice again. But your investors were promised a state-of-the-art facility. Removing underground components reduces the footprint by nearly 40%. Will they accept that? Silence settled over the room. For the first time since my accident, they were really seeing me, not as a broken worker to discard, but as an adversary who had outmaneuvered them. What do you actually want? Thorne finally asked, his soft voice hardened with frustration. I met Damien's gaze. I want what those minerals are worth. $13 million. Impossible, he snapped. Then I want a percentage of your new facility's profits in perpetuity. 10%. Also impossible. Then we remain at an impasse, I said, gathering my papers. I'll proceed with the injunction tomorrow morning. Wait. It was one of the board members, an older woman named Vega, who had been silent until now. All eyes turned to her. Perhaps we're approaching this the wrong way. Miss Voss was a valuable employee before her injury. We invested in her training, her education, and we failed her when the accident happened. She looked at me with something close to genuine regret. What if we offered partnership instead of opposition? What kind of partnership? Ree asked carefully. A joint venture, Vega said. We extract the minerals during construction. We have the equipment, permits, and expertise. Ms. Voss has the rights. We split the proceeds 60-40 in her favor. The room erupted with objections. Thorne leaned toward Damien, whispering urgently. Ree and Lena leaned toward me. It's not $13 million up front, Lena murmured. But it could be more long-term if the deposits are as rich as we think. And you'd stay involved with the company, on your terms this time, Ree added. I considered it, watching Damien argue with Vega. He didn't want this deal. He wanted me erased. That realization made my decision simple. I accept the joint venture, I said, cutting through the noise. With conditions. The room went still. First, I want a formal acknowledgement of the safety failures that caused my injury. Damien started to object, but Vega silenced him with a look. Second, I want a company-wide overhaul of worker safety protocols, with quarterly public reporting. Thorne frowned and made a note. And third, I want a seat on the board's safety committee, with full voting rights. That caused the biggest reaction yet. Board seats were guarded like treasure. Impossible, Damien said again, but weaker this time. Actually, Vega replied, shareholders have been pushing for someone with direct production experience. Ms. Voss qualifies. The negotiations dragged on for 3 more hours. By the end, my voice was hoarse, my damaged hand throbbing, but the framework of an agreement had taken shape, one that would change not just my life, but the lives of countless workers. As we stood to leave, Damien pulled me aside. You've won this round, he said quietly, but remember who you're dealing with. I met his gaze. I remember exactly who I'm dealing with. That's why I recorded everything you said. His eyes widened slightly. I'm not the person you discarded anymore, Damien. I don't scare easily now. The weeks that followed blurred together. The joint venture was finalized. Construction began with specialized extraction equipment. The deposits were even richer than predicted. My first check arrived 30 days later, $2 million as an advance. I paid off my medical debt and bought a home designed for days when my hand wouldn't cooperate. But money wasn't the real victory. At the first safety committee meeting, I presented years of ignored data on accident patterns. This time, the board listened. Changes were made. Training was rebuilt. 6 months later, workplace injuries dropped by 62%. A year after that first confrontation, I sat across from Damien again, now as a voting board committee member, reviewing a report showing $17 million in mineral revenue from the first phase alone. "The shareholders are pleased," he said stiffly. "The workers are safer," I replied. "That matters more." He didn't agree. Men like Damien rarely change, but he'd been forced to adapt. My hand still aches in the cold. I still can't make a full fist or feel all my fingertips. Some injuries never fully heal. But hear this. The most dangerous moment of my life wasn't when the conveyor crushed my hand. It was when I believed I was powerless, when I accepted their definition of my worth. The real revenge wasn't the money, though it helped. It wasn't watching Damien squirm, though I won't deny the satisfaction. The true revenge was becoming someone who couldn't be ignored, transforming from victim to advocate, from powerless to powerful. If you're watching this feeling broken or discarded, know this: your story isn't over. The people who underestimate you are making the most expensive mistake of their lives. Your value is inherent, unchangeable, and yours alone. If this story resonated, like and subscribe. Share where you're watching from. And remember, sometimes the greatest revenge isn't getting even. It's rising so far that they're forced to watch. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better.